Uh, a very good morning to one and all present here. So we are here at the Dialogue Cafe on the 26th morning, 11 a.m. For the occasion of the Kargil Vijay Divas, which is celebrated on the victory of Kargil War. Uh, so on behalf of Bangalore South District, I welcome two of the most inspiring and interesting soldiers who gave uh, who spent their life in the army and in the air force, and they're going to share their experiences with us on the Kargil Vijay Divas. So to introduce one by one, so I'll go with Colonel Vikram Iyengar sir, who is retired and was commissioned into the 8th Battalion of Gwalior Rifles in December 1997. He has served in almost all operational theaters, including Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh, Assam, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, besides being a military observer in the United Nations mission in Sudan. He successfully commanded his own unit, 8 Gwalior Rifles in Ladakh. The unit won a gold medal in an international combat patrolling competition at Wales, UK, under his leadership. Colonel Vikram Iyengar sir has been cited for gallantry and distinguished service a number of times, and is thrice a recipient of Chief or Vice Chief of Army Commendation. He has tentated several important staff assignments in his service, which included Military Operations Directorate in Army Headquarters, Chief Logistics Officer in an Infantry Brigade, and Chief Operations Officer of Karnataka and Kerala sub-area before taking premature retirement. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you,
Uh,
Supreet. One minor correction, I hope you don't mind, but it is the Garhwal Rifles, not the Gwalior Rifles. So,
oh,
firstly, thank you for having me over, and I just wanted to make this small correction.
thank you, sir. Sorry for my mistake. Uh, Next, we have uh, Group Captain T.R. Ravi, sir, the commanding officer of the only C-17 Squadron and Air Force transport pilot with over 24 years of flying experience in the transport fleet, with a record of accident or incident-free aviation for the entire flying career of close to 8,000 hours. He has the highest IAF CAT IR rating, A Master Green, or on all types of aircraft, flown with CAT A flying instructor and AEB examiner of HPT 32, HJT 16, AN 32, IL 76, C-17, and Globe Master Aircraft. Group Captain Ravi has executed the only heavy wide bodied aircraft landing at Mekuka, an Austria airfield, and executed the only heavy wide body aircraft landing at Mysore on 100 feet wide runway during demonetization period to carry 6,700 crores of newly printed currency. He has been awarded with 3-star for excellent flight safety record, and awarded the commendations from the Commander in Council and Chief of Air Staff. Sir was honored with Presidential Award, Vayu Sena Medal for outstanding service for the nation. Sir has operated extensively in hill and mountain flying in eastern and northern Himalayas on AN-32, IL-76, and C-7. Setting up supervision and operationalization of $4.1 billion of C-17 infrastructure was successfully conducted by Group Captain T.R. Ravi, sir. So I welcome both of the most inspiring soldiers of the country, inspiring people of the country. So we are pleasure to have you here, sir, on the Bharat Scouts and Guides Bangalore South District Association. On behalf of the District Commissioner and District Secretary and all the district members, I welcome both of you. So now I hand over it to Group Captain T.R. Ravi sir and Colonel Vikram sir. So I request you to inspire all the young people across the country who's watching it live in Facebook and YouTube.
Thank you, Supreet. Thank you very much. And today is a very important day for us, Kargil Divas Day. And I, on behalf of everybody I congratulate everybody for having this successful mission long time back. Now, before we go through this factual narrative of the Kargil War, it's very important for everybody to understand that what is the background of this operation and what is this battlefront about. It's something like, if I have to give you an example, in the Scouts, you're given an adventure wherein you're supposed to cross over a particular river, and then you're given resources as a group joint exercise. Now, before you understand to do this mission, you have to understand what this crossing of river is about, what are the resources you have, and then plan accordingly. So it is very important for everybody to understand before we actually go about the narrative of the Kargil operations, to understand the battlefront, to understand the terrain. So all this, I would like to request Colonel Vikram Retd to give you a little bit more insight to this so that you will understand as and when we talk about the sequence of events. So Vikram, over to you.
Thank you so much, Group Captain Ravi. And thank you for bringing that little example of the resources and how the mission, even in our adventure activities, leads to something like that. So, all of you young people out there, firstly, happy Kargil Divas. Now, before coming on to the battle per se, let's try and understand what kind of the terrain or what were the imperatives which were going into this battle, which was one of the most recent examples of a high altitude battle anywhere in the world. So, since a lot of our viewers are from Bangalore and Karnataka, so I can just take an example of the Nandi Hills. Nandi Hills is located at the top is located at a height of about 4,800 feet above sea level. And when you come to Kargil, you are talking about between 16,000 and 18,000 feet above sea level. So multiply Nandini Hill maybe 3 times or 3.5.
I think there's some small network issue, sir. Could you continue, please?
Yeah, so I think, Balaji, I'll continue with this. So, he was trying to give you, what is the background of all this, corporate operations is about. Now, I'll give you what, from the Air Force perspective, what is most important. Now, you have to understand that, you have a pyramid and you want to bomb somebody who is right on the top of the pyramid. And because you're not allowed to cross the LOC as per the government will and policy, you are supposed to fly the aeroplane at a very high altitude of 30,000 feet and drop the bomb precisely to go and hit the tip of the pyramid. It's very difficult, isn't it? So what was most important is now to understand the terrain. Now, for you people to understand, that entire area of Kargil is an offshoot of the world's second tallest mountain, that is K2, which is about close to about 28,300 feet, to the next Nanga Parvat hill. And all the ridge along, there are multiple terrain and high hilly terrainous area. So the height varied from Kargil, which was about 8,900 feet, to Dras, which is about 11,300 feet, and to Tiger, which is about 16,400 feet. So the entire terrain is a very high altitude terraneous area, and the operation is called as Safed Sagar because at that particular time it was complete whitewash. So it was very difficult to know exactly where the enemies were holding. So for us, the most important thing was to get the exact coordinates so that we could bomb that particular place and we could kill those enemies, those who had intruded. Now, there has to be a very nice sync and synergy between Army and Air Force. I'll just give an example. Like, obviously, you will ask the Army, who are right in front of the enemy, to give us the coordinates. So, one instance, what my friend shared with me was the colonel who was there, he got a map and then he circled and then said, this is where I want the bombing to be done. But on the map, that circle would be around, say, 100 kilometers. So we had to explain to the colonel that you have to put a dot there to ensure that exactly that coordinate between just about 500 meters by 500. Even that is pretty large. So the importance of coordinate is very, very important. So we have to get exact coordinates. Only then we know exactly where the enemy positions are. Like as I told, when the scenario started, Vikram, when he comes on land, he will give you the background. I mean, he will explain to you how it started and all that stuff. But when it came to the Air Force, when we were asked, it was almost 3 weeks since it was known that the people have already intruded. So we were not having exact coordinates. And based on the coordinates given by the army then, we had taken multiple recce missions. Now, I hope you youngsters will understand that when you're flying low, you will be able to see the terrain better, and you will be able to see any hotspots, any enemy positions better. But if you're flying at a very high altitude, and that too, like as I said, it's Safed Sagar, it is very difficult to identify exactly the enemy positions. But you cannot fly low also, because they had surface-to-air missile pads. So if you fly very low, then you're shot by a Stinger missile, which they had at that particular time. So what I'll do right now is I will try to narrate you the fighter operations, based on one of my course mates, who unveiled, his story when he was present during that time. So to start with, it was 16th May. It was a Sunday, and that particular squadron had 21 pilots, and of 21 pilots, the 17 pilots were all youngsters and bachelors. So it was like any other Sunday. They're all sleeping, and early in the morning they had gotten up. A very lazy morning supposed to be. Though of course they knew that the previous night they were the Indian Army were engaged with some skirmishes and other things, but it was like any other Sunday for them. But the flight commander, then Squadron Leader Ahuja, had come and then told them to fall in, and all the pilots had gone to the squadron, and before they could reach, the commanding officer was already there, who later became Chief of Air Staff. We fondly call him as Tony Khamaza. So there was a briefing there, and all the aircrafts were supposed to ferry on the very particular day to Srinagar. But unfortunately, on that particular afternoon, there is a pass called as Banihal Pass, where you have to cross over to go to Srinagar. So because of very bad weather, all those aeroplanes could not. Hi Vikram, I think you have joined back. I'll just finish this part of the instant which I'm covering,
Yes,
then I'll
yes,
hand you over back.
Captain Ravi. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
so-
There was some glitch with the internet.
Yeah, no problem. So all these guys, they were supposed to ferry on that day. They couldn't ferry because of the very bad weather in Banihal. They came back, and next day they ferried the aircraft to Srinagar. And once they landed at Srinagar, they could see so many aircrafts landed IL-76. Normally in Srinagar, 1 or 2 IL-76 are there, but they saw multiple IL-76. And after they landed, only then they realized, yes, we are into the game now. They were briefed. Now, this particular squadron was trained for recce sorties. So from 16th May onwards to 27th May, there were a number of recce missions every day. The only purpose was to fly at a very altitude of, say, 30,000 feet to avoid these Stinger missiles, and they could get whatever intelligence that was possible in a format of recording, and then they could analyze it to exactly pinpoint what exactly the coordinates were, the important coordinates which needs to be busted. Before I go on to what happened on 27th and 28th, which was a very bad phase of the initial phase of the Air Force operation, now that Colonel Vikram is back, I'll hand it over to him to give you the starting background, the starting, the steps which led to this Kargil ops. Vikram, to you.
Thank you once again. So as I was telling you, I was just giving a comparative height. So we are the entire state, or erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, I should say, is divided into 3 very distinct geographic regions. On one side, you have the Jammu Plains, which leads up to the hills, which build up to the Pir Panjal range, which is a very formidable range. And across the Pir Panjal, there is a valley or a ball formed, which is referred to as the Kashmir Valley, of which part is the Srinagar. And then when you again cross these mountains towards the north and east, you have to cross over the Zojila Pass, which is a very treacherous pass, and it is normally closed during the winter months due to heavy snowfall. And that is when you enter into the area which we call Ladakh. And Ladakh itself has two very distinct geographic regions. Towards the west, that is Kargil, right up till the Zojila Pass, Moscow Valley. It is commonly referred to as Western Ladakh. And beyond Nimmu, Leh, and so on towards the border with or the line of actual control with China, we have the region known as Eastern Ladakh. So the main difference between this has to be understood to understand how the battlefield is. Whereas Eastern Ladakh consists of mainly a plateau area, and it is interspersed with very, very dominating heights in excess of, in many areas, it's in excess of 6,000 meters above sea level. In the western part of Ladakh, it is following the valley of various rivers. We have got the Dras, the Suru, and partly the Indus rivers. And the heights are, there is no plateau per se. These small towns which Group Captain Ravi was speaking about, that is Dras and Kargil, these are formed in the valley. So, and now the National Highway 1, which connects Jammu region, the Srinagar, that is the Kashmir Valley, as well as Ladakh, is passing through these areas of the Mashko Valley, Dras, Kargil. Then it goes onward toward the eastern part of Ladakh and ends up at Leh. So this is a vital link for all the troops who are positioned in both parts of the region. And these heights, which witnessed the Kargil War, they oversee and they directly observe this National Highway 1. I am sure Group Captain Ravi would have already told you about. Now, coming on to what were the precursors or what were the preliminary steps, events which took place in both these countries and what led to it. So first we have to understand that Pakistan has always smarted after the 1971 war. Since then, they have that agenda that somehow they will keep this Kashmir issue alive. The second part is that both the countries had recently tested their nuclear capabilities, and perhaps Pakistan had thought that now that they had a credible deterrent in the form of a nuclear weapon, they could perhaps go into a kind of a limited battle without um, the uh, the kind of fear that India is the only nuclear power in the region. The second and the third, sorry, important thing is that these, in case he cuts off the national highway, that means that in some way he could stop the logistic effort which is required by the troops who are deployed in the Siachen region. And with that, maybe force India to withdraw. And the last compulsion possibly is that they wanted to internationalize the Kashmir issue, which has always been an agenda with them. So I suppose by now you would have got a clear idea that what were the events which led up to it and what kind of terrain we are talking about. I do not have a photograph at this moment, but any of you who are proficient with Google Earth, you can see the relative heights of that area. So now coming to what were the sequence of events which take place, I already told you about the tests conducted by both the nations. In fact, there was a Lahore declaration by our erstwhile the former Prime Minister, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and actually things seemed that they were quite under control. But between February and April, Pakistan had pushed in what were initially thought to be irregulars. That when we talk about irregular, we say that there is a part of the army which is called the regular forces. And then you have those who are not aligned to any particular organization per se. They are non-state actors, or you can call them that they are willing to participate on their own. So these are normally referred to as non-state actors, or you can call them irregulars. However, there is no doubt in our mind that this was a mixed force, but we did not know it at that point of time. So we only discovered what had happened, that there are certain posts which, due to the severity of the winter, used to be left vacated during the winter months, and only patrols used to go and confirm whether these defenses are intact or not. And about 132 posts, right from Mashko Valley towards the west, up till the Siachen region, that is the Chor Batla and the Turtuk region onto the east, were occupied by Pakistani forces. And unfortunately, we did not come to know about it at that time. It was only around 5th of May that a patrol led by Captain Saurabh Kalia uh, went to examine the state of these defenses, and this patrol got ambushed. The entire patrol team was tortured and right up to death, and that is when we realized that this infiltration had taken place. But whether they were regulars, army troops from Pakistan, or whether they were the so-called Mujahideen, we still did not have any credible evidence to state that. And initially, it was thought that since they were mostly mujahideen or irregulars, some local level actions to evict them would suffice. And accordingly, local level actions in that area, which I might also tell you that there was only one formation that time. One formation in the army parlance means about, say, 24 to 2500 troops, which were taking care of that whole area. And these local level actions did not yield any results. In fact, we suffered some huge casualties, and that is when we realized that we would perhaps need a more concentrated response from the Air Force, not only to help us assimilate that what is the level and extent of infiltration, but in support us in any way they can. I'll hand you over to Group Captain Ravi now for the balance of the narrative.
So thanks for Trevor.
Uh,
And the terrain which I have explained it to you in terms of the Air Force perspective. And most important was to get the coordinates, as exactly where these enemy positions are. So which again I have explained to you how the synergy between the Army and the Air Force is very, very important. And then I've already told you how on 16th May, a particular squadron got airborne and then they reached Srinagar. And then it came till the story till 27th May. Now, on 27th May, unfortunately, the first incident happened. Like as I explained it to you, the fighter aircraft could not come below 30,000 feet because the surface-to-air missile, the shoulder-fired missile, the Stinger missile, was very operational at that area, and they could easily shoot the aircrafts down. So one of the aircraft which had flown close to that area for a recce mission. Unfortunately, it is so happens that on a particular MiG-27 aircraft, it is told that if in case there is a lot of firing, the gun firing which happens when you use the gun firing, what happens at a particular altitude above 6 kilometers, the engine flames out. Unfortunately, that particular aircraft had an engine flame out, and the pilot had to eject. And Flight Lieutenant Nachiketa, I'm sure you all know about this story, was taken as prisoner of war. Fortunately, maybe he was with the army regulars, like what Colonel Vikram explained, and then we got Flight Lieutenant Nachiketa back. And because this aircraft was down, the flight commander, Sonal Ahuja, whom I mentioned to you all a while back, he went there, he was close there. He wanted to take the GPS coordinate exact position of that particular aircraft so that we could send our search and rescue mission there. So when he flew over there, the missile was fired upon him. The aircraft got damaged, and then he also had to exit. And unfortunately, when he came down, he was caught by the terrorist, and he was brutally murdered, which again you all know about it. So on the same day when these two incidents happened, it was a setback for us. And I'll also narrate one more incident. This is how the fog of war happens. There was Flight Lieutenant Welde. He was the co-pilot of Cheetah helicopter. He was doing search and rescue operation, so he was told to go and recce that particular area to find if Nachiketa or Ahuja was there, and then we could retrieve them. He landed at the village. He spoke to the villagers. The villagers gave him a direction where exactly go. He went over there and then they flew back. Now, just imagine he flew back from that particular almost close to crash site, and fortunately, that particular helicopter was not shot. Now, apart from these fighter operations, there were also helicopter operations which took place. We had attack helicopters, Mi-35s, but unfortunately, it was not very successful at that particular height. So we went for an innovative idea of using Mi-17 at those terraneous areas. Now, unfortunately, we had only 5 sets of CMDs and armor plating. And with whatever we had, there were 2 waves planned, 6 aircraft mission. And when the aircrafts were starting up, unfortunately, 2 aircraft became unserviceable. And 4 aircraft mission went there, the helicopter formation. They were supposed to go in the first wave and fire all 128 missiles on a particular area, which they were very sure that the enemies were holed up. They were supposed to go there, and the second wave was supposed to go again a later while, and then shoot another 128 rockets, 58 rockets. Now, unfortunately, 2 aircrafts were not having the CMDAs. CMDAs is countermeasure dispensing systems, which you almost have seen in the movie. When the missile is locked on, you fire the flares. So the missile which is supposed to come towards the aircraft, it goes toward the flares and it gets diverted from the aircraft. Now, unfortunately, when these aircrafts were flying close to that area, the missiles were fired. And these 2 aircrafts, which were not carrying CMDAs, were shot down. And we lost like our Wing Commander Rajiv Pundir were lost. So on the same day, we had this happened the very next day. That is from 27 to 28, we had all these incidents happening. So it was a major setback for us. So for us, the most important thing was to get the coordinates. And second was to make some kind of a tactics to avoid the sand and then go very close to these bunkers and then fire them. And when all these things happen, the innovative idea of Air Force came on where we thought that yes, Mirage 2000 is the most potent aircraft which could be utilized. And this became the game changer for the Kargil operations, which I will tell you later. I'll just get back to Colonel Vikram to tell you what Army was doing all this while. Vikram, over to you.
Thank you so much, Group Captain Ravi. Now, as I have already explained to the terrain of the battlefield, and let's further subdivide it now. If you have to kind of imagine in your mind that you are standing on the National Highway 1 Alpha, which is on the valley of this entire huge big mountain range, and then you are looking towards your north, and then you see these very dominating heights which are stretching as far as the eye can see. And as Group Captain Ravi had brought out in part of his narrative, that these are all sort of offshoots of the second highest mountain range in the world, which is the K2. So you can imagine the kind of heights. And so when you see towards your east, we are first talking about the Mashko Valley. Thereafter, we have the Dras Kargil Heights, which includes the Tolo Link feature, which is now quite famous. In fact, most of us have heard these names perhaps for the first time after the Kargil War, but it is common folklore now. You have the Tiger Hill complex. And then further east to that is the Batalik sector, and you have heights like Jubar, and then finally Chor Batla more towards the glacier, and a height also called as 0.5770, which was perhaps the easternmost part of the battlefield, and it was also the highest point which the Indian Army fought and successfully captured, and I shall tell you more about it subsequently. So when initially now it was confirmed now that the Air Force had also suffered a few casualties, our assaults with the local brigade groups did not work. There was a call for mobilizing more troops. So more troops from the Army's Eastern Command and the Central Command, they were rushed to that area. And initially, the forces which were already present in the Kashmir Valley were rushed in to help and salvage the situation. And that is what was done, but it was extremely difficult because as I said, these heights which the Pakistanis had occupied were directly overlooking the national highway, and therefore they were observing pinpoint artillery fire onto these roads, and it became difficult for the army transport teams to move up at all. So, thanks in part to the help of the Air Force by targeting some of these areas, and in the cover of darkness, these forces were moved up. And then small brigade is, as I told you earlier, it's about 2,000 2,400 troops, and battalion, which is between 400 to 800 men who are available, which carried out these actions. And unlike a plane where perhaps one man can take on another man, we call it a 1-to-1 ratio. In super high altitudes like this, which you have to understand, firstly, it is the height itself, climbing a gradient of that kind, which is 70-80 degree slopes. The second part is that you have to visualize that the temperatures during the night time, no attack could be possible in the day when you are under observation. So it was in the night, with temperatures even in the summer months would go down to minus 15 degrees centigrade. And the third and the biggest disadvantage perhaps at fighting at these altitudes is that you have got oxygen only 40% of what is normal. So, but it was decided that first we will make these operations into three parts. In the first part, we will get rid of the Pakistanis who have direct observation on the national highway. Once that is done, we can induct more forces, and then the second phase of the operation would be to throw back the intruders from back across the line of control where they had come from. And the third phase consisted of those areas which were slightly away but would help us, which needed to for the entire operation to be successful. So the battles which were fought, it was not a singular battle which was fought and we took about 5 to 10 days to succeed. No, it was not like that. Many such small battles were lost. We lost men. You can imagine the situation where there are hundreds and hundreds of RT, gunfire, shells being thrown at towards you. There are bomb blasts taking place every day. There is minefield which explodes as soon as the enemy puts his foot on it, which the Pakistanis had made a part of their defensive network. And then you have the aimed fire from the intruders as well. And this combined with the difficulties of the terrain, so many such attacks were launched, and some of them succeeded, some of them failed. By inch and foot by foot, we managed to reclaim first the heights which were overlooking the National Highway 1 in Dras. And primary battle, of course, which is possibly most televised, Captain Vikram Batra's attack and successful capture of point 4875. That is one. Second thing is that after that you have the Tololing complex. Now the Tololing complex extends from Tiger Hill and goes further eastwards, and it is not just one complex or one post which has to be captured. There are a number of small, about 20 odd such posts which make up the entire complex. So just clearing one part was of no use. And the operational method which was used was that first our Air Force and the artillery would be used to sort of soften up these targets, make it possible for the infantrymen to get into some kind of formation and reach as close to the target as possible. And once they are close enough to the target, all this supporting fire would be withdrawn. And then what followed was more or less a hand-to-hand combat. I can give you a lot of details about those battles, but I think I should just mention a little part about Siachen before we get any ahead. So Siachen is also called the AGPL, and this is the line which separates for the Pakistani troops with us. And this was in the 80s, in fact 84, that there was a scramble that who will reach these heights first. From the Pakistan side, they also tried, and from the Indian side, we also tried. And we managed to reach and take most of the glaciated terrain of Siachen into our control. And that operation is called Operation Meghdoot. I just mention it here because Supreet had specifically asked me to mention. And what was the importance of this? That it is the world's highest battleground, everybody realizes. But what maybe people do not realizes that it also controls the gateway from the Aksai Chin to going towards into Pakistan, and part of this border road initiative by our other neighbor in the east, that is China. So that is the importance. Operation Meghdoot is an ongoing operation. I will not discuss more about it just because Supreet asked, so I mentioned it here. And one of the battles, which is 0.5770, did take place in this area. But before I come into 0.5770, I would like to tell you a little more about the Tiger Hill, because this was a very good example of jointmanship between the Army and the Indian Air Force. And I would hand you over back to Group Captain Ravi to just give you an insight into how the Air Force helped out the ground forces in recapturing this height. So,
Yeah, thank you, Vikram. So, I was now telling you that Mirage 2000 became the game changer of the entire operations. We had used all aircraft like MiG-21, 27, 25s, everything was used. And finally, we had to come out with something which is very innovative to ensure that for the first time, probably in the world, targeting enemy position at a height of 18,000 feet was absolutely, for the first time, it was ever happening. So all this time, Mirage 2000 people, the technicians and the officers, they were brainstorming as how to use this Mirage 2000. Later on, the logisticians realized that there were bombs, which were vintage bombs, which were bought from Spain in 1970s and was intended to be used by Ajit aircraft. This was compatible with Mirage 2000. So the Mirage 2000 started using those bombs, and then they had a better capability of pinpoint drops. So the Mirage 2000 started using all these bombs. One big day was the 16th June. It was a very big day. A typical mission, how it happens is that you can imagine, there are 4 aircraft, Mirage 2000. All of them have got dumb bombs. When I call it dumb bombs, it is not guided. So each of them are carrying 12 to 14 bombs, 4 aircrafts, and followed by one more Mirage 2000, which has got a laser designated pod and the LGB, the laser guided bomb. So 4 plus 1, 5 aircraft, and also 3 more aircraft coming into formation with a weapon called as BVR, that is Beyond Visual Range weapon. So this is a typical package which flew on 16th June. Not exactly, there's a typical package which flies. So they flew over the Tiger Hill, and the first mission was over the Motodalo, which was one of the most critical area of that part. So Muntodalo was a place where it had become a hub from where all the supplies were going to all the ridges where all these enemies were holed up. So this package went over Muntodalo and bombed the entire area. Now just imagine a major hub which was supplying food, water, armament, everything to all the bunkers, the enemy bunkers were bombed, and literally 50 structures were destroyed. And there were close to about 100 to 150 terrorists were killed on that particular day. So 16 June was a major event. And once this happened, the backbone of the entire supply system had broken off. The resistance had altered. It was a morale down day for all these enemies. Now, followed by 16 June, the Mirages 2000, when they started getting this success, there were multiple missions. Every day, there were precision-guided munitions which were used to destroy all these bunkers. Next was on 24th June. On 24th June and 25th June, there were multiple bombs which have been used. 15 to 24 bombs were, used over those areas. Overall, in the entire mission, Entire Kargil operations, total there were 9 LGBs which were utilized, and 8 of them by the Mirage 2000. Colonel Vikram was mentioning about Batra. A particular day on 7th July, it was pre-decided by Captain Batra's team that irrespective of what happens, on that particular day, they wanted to go and take over the Tiger Hill. And on 6th May, the Mirage 2000 flew over it, and they had absolute precision strike over a position which was 2.5 kilometers east of the Tiger Hill on the 6th night. So after this, the enemy had broken down. It became, of course, the next day, Vikram Batra and team had done a wonderful, wonderful job. But yes, the resistance had come down much lesser, probably maybe 50% because of the precision strikes made by the Mirage 2000. So the Mirage 2000 was a game changer, which really took off lots and lots of pressure off the army. And now army was in a much better position to go and acquire all those hilltops. Now we'll hand over to Colonel Vikram to tell you how we swept the entire process in the last stages, and then the battle was ours. We won at the end of the day. Vikram, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. And so I just wanted to add to that part. I think that by 8th of July, we actually the entire complex soon forces the and fight and fight. So and further
Yeah, I think Colonel Vikram, is getting some internet issues. So, once by about 8th of July or so, when all our airstrike missions were pretty much successful, it became. I should not say it's a very easy path for the army to just do the combing operation. They have done a wonderful, wonderful job. Lots of lives were lost, but yes, we won this. They went ahead inch by inch, like what Colonel Vikram was saying. They went inch by inch. Just imagine. You scouts, I'm sure, during your exercises, you must be, you're climbing the particular ridge using a rope. You just climb by about, say, 10, 15 meters and you're gasping for your breath. But now just imagine the army people at that particular altitude, 18,000 feet, and that too in night with chilly winds. They used to climb inch by inch and took over each and every top hill, which was so important for us. I think Vikram was back with us.
Yeah, I'm extremely sorry about this internet, but yeah, that is even in battle that you have your plans laid out and then something else crops up which forces you to go in for a contingency plan. So that is what was happening even in Kargil. Despite our best plan, there was always a few surprises. For example, the way we thought that it is possibly a section that is about 10 Pakistani soldiers, we would reach the hilltop and suddenly discover that there is not one post, but there are 5 small posts. We thought that perhaps we will escape firing at us from all possible directions. So I think I'll just reiterate once again that it was a very slow progress. It might seem that 10 days, it took about 4 to 5 attacks before we finally dislodged terrain considerations and the area, the difficulty of the area. It was a very, very slow progress, and we suffered massive casualties because, see, it is very easy. If one person is sitting on top of a height, he can perhaps hold off 100 people if he is suitably positioned. And here we were talking about people who were armed with missiles, they were armed with rocket launchers, they were armed with all kinds of small ammunition. Against them, the progress was slow, but by little, with a lot of hand-to-hand fighting, we recaptured these heights. I was telling you about Jubar. So once Jubar was there, the last battles which took place were in Chor Batla. Now, on the 26th of July, when we finally captured Chor Batla against a very determined Pakistani opposition, that was the signaling of the end of the operations, and Operation Vijay was seized. But before I end, with your permission, sir, I would like to tell them about point 5770. Now, point 5770 is further northeast of the Batalik subsector and belongs to the Soltoro area region. And nearly 19,000 feet above sea level. And it was such a rocky pinnacle that it was thought that it is perhaps not possible to capture this area. But we had some specialist mountain climbers, primary amongst them of Major Shamhal Sinha, who was an instructor in the high altitude warfare school of the Indian Army. And he, along with his team, they actually did what is called an ice assault, where they went climbing through a cliff, reached the top, and surprised the Pakistanis who were there, because they did not expect anybody would climb up from that approach, attack them. And it was a very successful attack with minimum number of casualties to our side. And though it was very much, it was one of the very important examples of high altitude warfare in the world. It's a case study in most armies, in fact, nowadays. So coming back to Chor Batla, on 26th, we successfully managed to put the tricolor, and that ended officially Operation.
Yeah.
From
Yeah, I think we lost Vikram again. So I think he has almost covered almost everything till Chor Batla. So Chor Batla was the last phase of the Kargil operations, and finally we succeeded in driving out the entire Pakistani terrorists and militants. So it was a wonderful event. So see, one of the most important thing that you would have realized is that this was ever the first time that we had fought both Army and Air Force. Well, of course, no, he already mentioned Op Meghadut in 1984. But apart from that, a major conflict which had happened at an average altitude of 18,000 feet. And the synergy between the Army and the Air Force was the best. And we had learned lots and lots of lessons from this war. And that is how now you will see that since last 2 decades, we have had a technological leap in all, whether it is manpower training, whether it is the apparatus, whether it is the men, machine, and material that we have right now, is far superior. In terms of Air Force, now we're going to have Rafale. In fact, actually, next week, the Rafale is going to land, which is the state-of-the-art missiles. And I think, if anybody wanted to have this question, that what if, again, this thing happens now? So what will happen now? Let me tell you that the war will be over within even fewer days because of the assets that we have right now and because of the manpower training that we have done right now, learning from the past. So I think we have come to the conclusion and the end of the Kargil operations. Vikram is back online, and if Supreet, you and your team, if you want to ask any questions in particular, I think we are taking 15 minutes, 10 more minutes. I think we can go ahead with that.
Yes, sir. Whoever is interested to ask questions to both the inspiring, so you can ask it in your Facebook page and we'll show it here. So there's this one question from Matthias. Sir, approximately how many terrorists in total and how many locations were they operating from Kargil?
Thank you, Diva, for the question. As I already said, that this was not actually terrorists. We were just thinking they were terrorists, and that is what Pakistan wanted us to believe. But they were mostly regular army troops and troops from the Northern Light Infantry, which was a paramilitary and now part of the Pakistan Army. The terrorist element was there, but there is no proper count. But in total, about 5,000 Pakistani regulars and irregulars mixed, and they had taken over more than 130 odd posts, if that answers the question.
This is one of
I think Operation Meghadut. I think Colonel Vikram has already mentioned during his talk. Otherwise, just to re-emphasize, it happened in 1984. Like as he said, the international boundary was not very clearly demarcated. You have to go into the Google Earth and then see what exactly it is. So when, like as Colonel Vikram explained, the Indian Army took over a lot of positions in 1984, but the Pakistani, the regular and the army men, they wanted a little bit more posts, the higher posts. So we had a little bit of conflict in 1984, and Operation Meghadut was named after a Sanskrit poem, the Cloud Buster kind of a poem. And 1984 is the first time ever that actually this conflict also took place. Vikram, you wanted to add on anything else that you had told otherwise?
I had already mentioned, and I said it was a race. And perhaps in case you Google the Battle of Bana Top, you will come to know one of the finest Paramveer Chakra stories of the Indian Army. The gentleman later on was Subdar Major and Honorary Captain in the IMA when we were actually your age group youngsters, and I had the honor and pleasure of meeting this gentleman. Bana Top, the camp named after him, is part of Operation Meghadut folklore. But since it's an ongoing operation, Supreet, we will not mention too much about it. I've already told you the parts which were relevant to the Kargil War that I've already explained. But just know this much, that it is not only the world's highest battlefield, but it is one of the most difficult areas anybody can be deployed. And leave alone Indians, you can get people from even people like from the Scandinavian countries who are used to very low temperatures. Even for them, it is an almost impossible task. So that is about Operation Meghadut.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for your inspiration. Thanks for informing all about Kargil War. It was truly interesting for all of us, and I don't see any more questions coming up. So if there is any questions coming up, we will be putting it in the Facebook so that if there is any questions, we might get back to and ask for the answers. Thank you for your time, sir. Thank you, Captain Ravi, sir, and Colonel Vikram Iyengar, sir. Sir, it's really pleasure to have you here in the Bharat Scouts and Guides Dialogue Cafe, which is organized by the Bangalore South District Association. On behalf of the District Chief Commissioner, M.K. Khan, sir, and all the district members and district heads, I request, I I thank you for giving your time on this great occasion. It's a really great honor and pleasure that on this occasion we have two most important people who are a part of the war and who are inspiring us. We are sure there'll be few people in the future from the Scouts and Guides who will be joining the Indian Air Force and Indian Army and Indian. So thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for inspiring all of us, all the young. I think now we are almost done with the Kargil Vijay Divas celebrations. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned for more Dialogue Cafe, which is going to be coming up in the future days and coming up times. So, thank you, everyone, for having us. Thank you.
Thank you, Suprit. Wish you all the best. I'm sure most of you will join Army, Air Force, and Navy very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Supreet. Thank you, everyone, and all the best to all the Scouts and Guides